Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And of course, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. Always going to be stuff up there. And don't forget, still going to stick with Therapy Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to be joined by Nikki Javala from the Washington Post. So tune in for that. Bring your questions. We'll go for about a half hour, and Nikki and I will talk for a little bit and answer some of your questions. So please join us. Therapy Tuesday. I think it's needed. So there you go. Now, today, I'm not here to review the Miami game. We all know what happened. It was bad. But the couple things I do want to point out is highlight some of the things that are going on here. And one of which is, why didn't Terry McLaurin get the ball? Is it all just about the offense? Is it all about what? And to me, it's a combination of things. And I'll get into some of that stuff. What's going on with Sam Howell? Has he taken a step back? I think there's still some signs for hope, et cetera. And I also want to point out some communication issues that one team has and one team didn't have that's reflective of what happened Sunday. So again, don't look at it as a film review of Miami, because again, it was a disaster. But I do think there's things to learn is what's going on with McLaurin, what's going on with Howell, and some of the things with the defense. So let's start with Howell. I'm not going to go into detail with him and go over his entire game. I'm really going to focus a little bit more on Terry today. But with Howell, I think it's important to note that people here still believe in this guy. And this regime may be out the door, but there's a lot of people in that building that still believe in him. Now, where they're picking, somebody's going to have a choice to make. If they continue to stay at 4 in the draft, you're going to have a big choice to make. Do you try to get one of the quarterbacks? Would one of the guys even be there? If you're looking at the top, if both May and Williams are coming out, is one of them going to be there at 4? Considering Chicago and New England would be picking in the top 2, kind of hard to see that. So who would you be comfortable with at that 4, or would you trade? Whatever. Point is, you may have a decision to make. But when you talk to people here, what they really are impressed by with Howell is how he's handled the situation. It speaks volumes for him as a competitor, as a person, etc. And I think, somebody even pointed to me like, yeah, look at New York. This kid here is not imploding. And the way things have unfolded for him this year, he gets put in a situation where he's being asked to drop back and throw 55 times a game. You look at some great quarterbacks who have developed, they're not doing that, right? And I know, some younger guys, maybe they throw a lot, whatever. That's a lot to ask for a young kid. But he's handled it well. And so I think that speaks volumes for who they think he is and where they think he can get to because of that. And you want to see certain things. You don't want to see the mistakes. But even on that interception, I don't think that was necessarily on him. I think that's, when you look at that, the way the way the corners are playing, usually a receiver is going to try and drive a guy off, but the corners are already off. So I'm going to guess that you just need to take a couple steps back instead of taking 2 forward and coming back. Just get back and create a better lane for Howell to get the ball to him. And that, could Howell maybe have tucked it, but it's probably. But I also think that if they were playing press, I think then you're going to look to drive off, come back, and create that lane. But that wasn't the case. So my guess is that, in other words, I wouldn't just put it on Howell. And I don't even think it's that Miami knew it was coming, because if they did, the corners aren't playing that far off. So, it's just the guy rushing and makes the play. But the point is, it's not just, you can't just look at Howell and say, oh, what a horrible decision. There's other things to it there that you look at. And I think it's why, again, there's still belief in him as to where he can get to, especially if you create a better situation around him. Not to absolve, but it is to say, like, there are things that kid can do that I think you need to kind of grab onto after the season and say, where is he really at? And it's going to be hard fully to know, because the situation is not ideal for a young quarterback. But the way he's handled it, I think, is something that gives some people here, whether or not they're here or not in the future, reason to believe that the kid can play. And so I think one of the things that you would like to see for next year, and it's funny because I've talked to McLaurin about this a couple of times, is maybe some more symmetry between he and Howell. And, maybe spending a lot more time together in the off season, working on various aspects of the game, getting some of those back shoulder throws and getting a little bit more in rhythm with some of the stuff that you're going to face in the season. Sometimes the issues are not their chemistry or anything like that. I'm not saying they have chemistry issues. I'm just saying it's not about, oh, you work together or not. Sometimes it's simple as either someone didn't win the route or the line's not giving you protection to get the ball to the guy downfield the way you need to. So, but I do think like maybe just a lot of that offseason work together after this kind of a season would be good for them. And then it depends on what offense are you playing in, because we don't know that right now. But I do think that that's an issue. And then again, when you talk to people here, as part of the problem is they'll say like the line can't protect him. And there are times where you need to be able to drop back and trust that protection and get the ball downfield. I'm going to show you some examples of how it impacted McLaurin. So that is a big problem. Now, can you do things to offset that? Sure. And, does Miami, do you know who Miami's linemen are? But the way the scheme is, it really enhances what they do. And I think it provides some more balance to their game. So I think you can get there with this group. You have to improve it a little bit and then maybe tweak some details, whatever. But I think that's something that would help Howell going forward as well. So we're going to, you saw that, and I just wanted to go on a couple of minutes on that. And now one thing, before I get to McLaurin, I wanted to bring up the communication stuff, because I think this is a big deal for the secondary, and it's why they continue to struggle. And it's why Miami certainly didn't give up any big plays the other day, although we could have given up one to McLaurin, but they did not. But it's the communication. And there was one play in particular where Curtis Samuel goes in motion, and you see it here, and I'm putting it up here where he goes in motion from right to left to a tight formation on the left, and just a little quick out, and there's pressure coming, but the ball comes out right away. But you see, as he starts to go in motion, both safeties start to point, and they're pointing and they're communicating to the corners. And I showed you a little clip here of the safeties doing that. You can see the safeties pointing. You can see the one corner, I think it was Ramsey, certainly paying attention to what they're saying. And then you watch the safety drive down on Samuel as he runs the out. It's a 2-yard gain, but it starts with communication. You saw that a few times with this team. There's whereas with this team, with Washington, you did not see that. In fact, you haven't seen that much all year. And that's a problem. It's how you prevent those big plays. But they don't have a guy in the secondary that I think takes charge the way they need to. I think Derek Forrest can be that guy. I think Derek Forrest will make some mistakes, but Derek Forrest he's going to at least communicate. And he's one of those guys where he may be wrong, but you're going to be on the same page, even if he's wrong. But he's got the personality to take charge out there, even if he is a flawed player, what they all are. But I think that's something that he does well and can develop more in that area. Now, listen, they were given a big plays when he was in there too. So it's not like that's some elixir. But even when he was in there, some of those big plays were usually going to by Percy, or allowed by Percy Butler, just from positioning, out of position, angle, etc. And Forrest has some issues, but the point is they don't have somebody back there who's doing that. And you look at that first touchdown to Tyreek Hill, that's an example of what I'm talking about. You have a guy, and like their scouting report said that when Miami's in a 3-by-1 like that and Hill is in the middle, he's running a specific route. That should be alerted before the snap. That should be something that, and it was Quan Martin was over, and it was not man coverage, it was a zone match coverage, but it's something that though he and Cam Curl have to be pointing and yelling, hey, this is the route coming, this is the route coming. But and that didn't happen. And because of that, both of them didn't execute their assignment. Because of that, it's a 78-yard touchdown. But it's really, it highlights the difference between the two and what this team doesn't do well and what they need to get to in the future. You need to have a guy back there who can communicate. I don't care, again, I go back to the Bobby McCain. He wasn't a great player, but he was a guy who communicated well. I think it matters in that secondary. You need to have that guy. They do not have that guy right now, especially with Derek Forrest out. I think Forrest, again, can develop into being a better player, but also a stronger communicator out of that group. If it's me, I'm looking for a veteran in the offseason. Doesn't have to be a high price guy, but it's somebody who can communicate and get guys organized, et cetera. And, you need a couple of those guys. But if you have one guy doing it who's going to make sure that the other guy does it, if you have one guy communicating to Cam Curl or whomever, then they're going to make sure that it goes, but you're not seeing that right now. And it's a primary reason why that secondary continues to struggle. So let's spend a couple minutes on Terry McLaurin and we'll get out of here. So I think part of it is, there's a myriad of reasons why Terry has not had the kind of year that everybody wants him he hasn't had a 100-yard game. You look at him, like, here's a stat that was mind-boggling. Washington's the only team in the NFL that doesn't have a pass play by a receiver for 40 yards or more. I went through their records, and I went back all the way to 1970. There has not been a single year where they failed to have a receiver with at least a 40-yard catch. I think there were 1 or 2 years where it was like right at 40 or 41. Bottom line is, though, they always had it. They had 10 such plays last year by receivers, 0 this year. And one of the things we heard about a lot of was, this offense would create more explosive plays, create better situations for these guys to run after the catch. And it hasn't happened. And again, myriad of reasons. I think you can go back. I know with like Howell, for example, Howell and McLaurin, I think when it goes back to sometimes trust and anticipation. And the routes that McLaurin often runs, especially those digs and all that, you're going to throw with some level of anticipation. And I think that comes back to that trust. And I remember when Kirk Cousins was here and he was thrown to Deshaun Jackson, a lot of times they would talk to him about, you've just got to trust that he's going to be there. You've just got to trust that he's going to win on this route. And so in Cousins would look down and see, well, he's even with the defensive back. He's not going to throw it. The coaches would see him even, but what they knew is that Deshaun was always going to pull ahead at the end because he had great finishing speed, and he would kind of have a little gear that a little burst that he would save. I think there's a little, it's not saying that McLaurin's like in that same category receiver as far as his style, but he's a guy that can win. And we saw that with Heineke, and this, like, hey, Terry's open somewhere, right? Just throw it up there and Terry's going to get it. That's what, we're not seeing a lot of that. And I think there's sometimes where maybe you could get through that a little bit more and understand that he's got this advantage. He's going to somehow win on this route. And I think that's still a developing thing. And I remember talking to McLaurin about some of this, is just kind of getting on the same page with seeing things the same way. And there have been snippets throughout the year where I think they've gotten to that point, but it hasn't fully evolved to that point where they're seeing it exactly the same and you can adjust. And I think that's something McLaurin has been desperate to have here, is that quarterback that he's going to be on that have that kind of rhythm with. And it hasn't, and it's not there yet. And part of it is, again, the offense spreads the ball around. And there are times where on Sunday, where I think based on the coverage that he saw, he was going to go away from McLaurin pre-snap. And, and I think that happened, whether it's you can see that maybe a bracket or whatever it is, that he would go away from him initially. But there are also times where he was definitely open and couldn't get to him for whatever reason. So let's go to a couple of those. Let's see, where do I want to start here? So sometimes it's as simple as McLaurin is running deeper routes, and it's to do that, you need the protection to hold up. Like one of the times it was like he's going to run a deep in, and then he had man coverage against Howard. Looks like he probably could win on that route, but the Dolphins sent a blitz that actually they showed a 7-man package. I think they ended up rushing 5, but Washington had 6 blockers in and 2 were uncovered. So because the way the Dolphins disguised the blitz, which I like seeing that because it's a fun thing to do and it does work, and it works against these guys a lot. But because of that, he has to get the ball out. So he throws it to Bates. Bates runs a little pivot. It dives, can't get it. McLaurin is on the outside. It would have taken too much time to get on the ball. Not an option. There was another one. It's a 3rd and 7. There's a little bit of a level of trust and anticipation on this route. And it's a zone. And I'm showing this one here too, because it's a good one. But it's a zone. And if McLaurin breaks inside and he's there, and it's just a matter of, the trust and anticipation that you want to throw with in that situation. I think he's looking over there, hesitates just a little bit, tries to get out, and then he gets a sack because 43 has a little spin move. 43 gets chipped by I think it was Bates initially, and then does a spin move against Wiley and the sack. So that was one where, but he is open. And so like part of what I want to see is how open was he getting open? Yeah, he was. And there are a couple of variety of reasons why it wasn't then getting to him as well. Then on the deep one, the over the shoulder, I got to tell you, man, it's a hell of a throw by Sam Howell, because on this one, and this is one where I think if McLaurin's got to make the catch, because you're not getting the opportunities, make them count. It's a tough catch, but man, we've seen receivers make those tough catches against Washington all season. And if you're in that range, you want to be in that range, that's the catch you make. And I think McLaurin would say the same thing. But I want to point out the throw by Sam Howell, because he is getting pummeled as he's throwing the ball. McLaurin's at about the 20-yard line as Howell has to unload the ball, because again, another blitz that was disguised well, or pressure disguised well, that fools this line. And on this one, you have Chris Paul's blocking down. You have two guys. Is Leno and then John Bates on the outside, because you got Bradley Chubb there. Chubb steps, doesn't rush, then a linebacker loops inside. And, in that case, I'm pretty sure based on Howell, but it's a hell of a throw. So if that had been a touchdown catch, that's a highlight play for both players, because that's an unbelievable throw. Is right there. And my goodness. So again, but that's one where McLaurin wins and he gets open and he does have a chance. Not enough of those, clearly. And, there are times that he was bracketed. There are times where you see or that the Dolphins would have, you have corner with outside leverage, knowing you have inside help, and the safety's definitely paying attention to McLaurin. A couple of times he might help clear out an area because of the attention he gets. So, and even McLaurin talked about, he's going to want to turn on the film and see, are you still blocking? You still clearing out for others? Yes. And there were a couple of times in this game where that was the case. But man, you'd like to see him get the ball more. This is not about McLaurin's not an elite receiver. I don't know that. I don't know that I've ever considered him an elite receiver, because I think Tyreek Hill is an elite receiver. A.J. Brown right now is certainly an elite receiver. McLaurin's not playing like those guys are. And I don't know, he's not going to do what Tyreek Hill is doing. That's obscene. And I think it's a combination of guy with extreme elite talent with an elite offensive mind who makes it easier for him to then get those yards. But McLaurin is a very good receiver who we certainly can expect more from, whether it's for whoever's at fault. But again, sometimes that's that line, and sometimes they're not giving Howell enough time. And if you're running some deep digs, because that's where you're going to get those chunk plays, it's just not there. And there's one of those times on those deep digs, you have 3-by-1, so McLaurin's on the right. He's got the backside dig is open. And on the play, you can see Howell, and I even put this one up, and you see Howell just kind of duck his eyes as he comes up in the rush and never gets over to that side. And that's one of those, again, that's the kid's still learning. So you're going to have some of those hiccups. And that's one, but again, I'm looking at, where is McLaurin? Is it as simple as they got to design plays for him? Well, some of these plays are there for him. They're just not being made. And if you look at some of the plays, a handful of these plays that are made, suddenly you're looking at a 40-yard touchdown catch and a couple 20-yard gains. Now you're looking at 3 for 80 or 4 for 90, whatever it is. And now his game looks a lot different. And those opportunities were there. That's the key, because my thing is, well, is he getting, where are they getting open? How is he getting open? But you got to improve a couple things for them to get that away. And on that one, Howell runs up and has to run up and throw it away. And there was another dig after that, where it was down in the red zone. It's the one where McLaurin actually breaks up the play, but you can see, you have on the play, he runs another dig. He's open. Howard falls. He's open, but because of the pressure on Howell, you can see he's coming free, and I put that up there. But you have two guys kind of converging on him, and he's got to step up in the pocket, and he ends up throwing up a ball for grabs. It's not a great decision, but it's based on the score. You're giving your guy a shot, and McLaurin ends up breaking up the ball, but he was open on the dig. If you could have given him a little bit more time, I think you're going to have to fix that interior a little bit, whether getting a more consistency inside with some of the, somebody at center and guard. But you're going to have to fix that and get it into a better spot to give him a little bit more time. So if you want to hit some of those chunk plays, you can get more of those done. So anyway, not going to tell you that all things are rosy here, but it was again, you look at it and say, well, there were opportunities for it to happen. It wasn't as simple as, oh, you got to call more plays. Yeah, there's ways you can probably be more creative to get him the ball. And sometimes on the crossing routes, I'm watching it, and they did a good job passing them off from one zone to another. And the linebackers did a good job of being aware of what they were doing. And I think that's also something that, that happened. But I think it's going to start with, those two kind of getting more, just continue to work with each other, getting a little bit better protection, being able to provide better protection, however it is, whether it's through scheme, whether it's through just better players, and there you go. So I think if you can do that, get it solved. But man, frustrating year for all those guys. And I don't blame McLaurin for being frustrated, because I'm giving you a snapshot from one game, but it's been going on all year for him, where he just hasn't had that game for him where that he's capable, because we've seen it quite a bit in the past. And I think a big disappointment for this year has been the production by the receivers. I don't want to say the play by the receivers, but the production by the receivers, yards after the catch, the non-explosive plays. It just hasn't been there. And going forward, that's going to have to change. Anyways, that's it for me. I probably went too long. I know you don't want to talk about the game, but I wanted to talk about these players and some of those areas in particular. So again, Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Therapy Tuesday with Nikki Javala from the Washington Post. Tune in, join us. As always, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.